Zeta Talk. Nancy, are you there?
I am, and I'm ready to go. Boy, have we got some interesting stuff tonight. They talk about, I think we did evidence of Nibiru, I don't know, a year and a half ago or so.
Well,
It's been a while,
yeah.
But there's so much that's been unfolding so rapidly that I felt a refresher was necessary, especially because the moons of Nibiru have become so evident in photos, not even people that are using filters, but just cell phone, or there it is, they look on the horizon. And in any case, I'll jump right into it, but first I have to read our usual disclaimer. In partnership with USA EBN, Zeta Talk and the Zeta Report will be discussing the challenges of living on a planet beset with change. Rising seas, increasing earthquakes and volcanic activity, weather gone wild, and the worry of what to do in a worst-case scenario. We will also inject Zeta Talk prophecy on what is coming next and advice on readiness plans and safe locations. Whenever Zeta Talk is quoted, please remember that prophecy is not fact. It is opinion. It only becomes fact when it happens. The Zetas are remarkably accurate but have been wrong on occasion. Bear that in mind. For more information on this subject, please visit zetatalk.com or the Zeta Report on YouTube. Questions from the chat and issues raised in the chat will be addressed toward the end of the hour after the main feature has been presented. You will just drop your teeth, to see what's visible now. Lately, evidence that Nibiru is a real presence in our solar system has become quite undeniable. Though the media continues to debate, we have both attention to signs such as an Earth wobble apparent by sunrise and sunsets where the sun is in the wrong place, or a second sun where the sun seems to rise or set twice. This is, something that is going on. On occasion, the media will mention it, and they'll say, "Oh, these seem to be a light aberration." Is what
Yeah.
Just out of the willy-nilly, okay. Or brilliant moon swirl orbs, which have lately presented themselves in the classic string of pearls, seen naked eye. Now, the string of pearls showed up in 2003 and 2004 when Nibiru first entered the inner solar system and was on the opposite side of the sun from the Earth, and the sunlight bounced off of it, all these moon swirls in the vast dust cloud, and then you could see them. Then they seemed to disappear for years because there's such a dense, charged red iron oxide dust cloud that swarms around Nibiru, and the tail is usually wafting between Nibiru and Earth. So consequently, it gets lost in all of that, but it's coming closer, so these things are becoming more distinct. The brilliant moon swirls have lately presented themselves in this classic string of pearls. And this was seen on the horizon in Norway on October 5th at sunrise, a webcam. And it's cloudy skies, but not on the horizon. And there are these string of little white dots out, and you can see they're out there. So people said, "Oh, look at that." Now, this is not taken, with a filter, not with a cell phone cam, nothing, just on the webcam. Then Alberto captured something on October 17th. We're just all there in October. And a group, and you can see them. There's the classic Nibiru at 4 o'clock, and coming off of that is kind of like a string, and you can count these major moons. And it's right there, lost in the red dust. And a group of astonished hunters in Missouri on October 20th at sundown. Now, I have this in a newsletter because I quoted the Facebook posting where the guy says, we were hunting, near the Missouri River, and it was sundown, and there it was cloudy, but there was a break in the clouds where the sun had already set, apparently, but was shining up on the clouds, and so there was a hole, and up above, way up, it looked like someone took a pearl necklace off and hung it there, like in a semicircle, and there was 12 orbs in that. Then they appeared white, the same as that Norway horizon shot. So then over where the sun is shining through a break in the clouds, there are 12 spires of light coming down like rain, all the way from the cloud down to the water below, 12 and 12. So somehow each of these moons up there, cast light in this breach, and the clouds caught it and sent it down to the water. It was just astonishing. I don't know how many times this has been passed around. I'm sure many people on the internet have seen it. Well, that wasn't. The guy said he had an expert, somebody who was a quality assurance guy, I think it was Boeing, and asked him to look at that and say, what is that? And he had no explanation. So not only do these dozen moon swirls hang like a pearl necklace, they come down through with a dozen light spires, and I'm sure you could take a look at this and say it's not photoshopped, and because that's the usual brush-off excuse. Well, it's gotten better since then. On the 27th of November, Alberto caught what we call the boomerang. I've come to call it the boomerang. I think it's the checkmark moon swirl of old, where we would catch it sometimes on Soho, and the like, and it would look like going off at 90-degree angles from each other, jing, jing, two different lines. And we used to call it the checkmark moon swirl arrangement. Well, now I'm calling it the boomerang because you can see there's gauzy stuff in between both of those lines that come off the central point. You could count the moons in there. And it was so made a big deal about that, but now 3 days later, on the 30th of November, it's something that's coming out in this week's newsletter, in which he not only has the boomerang and the moons around Nibiru, which is the classic string of pearls, but there's two other areas between the two of them above the sun where you can see moons arranging themselves in a line like a string, but even more, sort of willy-nilly floating about in the dust cloud in these two places. And I counted up to 60. I was just stunned. So I found an old Zeta talk from 2002, which in this week's newsletter I'll have all this detailed. And this was when we were going out with CCD imaging in the night sky and watching Nibiru come in, the Nibiru complex. And at one point they were catching something that was like a cloudy, it looked like a swarm, like a locust cloud or something like that, dark and cloudy. And what the Zeta said is, what you have there is a moon cluster. That because all of these things follow Nibiru as it travels. They're always trailing behind. They're always surrounded by the red iron oxide dust. They're attracted to each other, but they are also repulsing each other with the repulsion force. So it's the nature, it's what God put into the universe, that a lot of these particles seek to clump with each other, but at the same time push away. So everything is always in motion. And it is this motion that creates, really, life, our universe, everything, all the action. So they were describing moon swirls and why they swirl and why they arrange in a string of pearls like that, etc. And in that 2002 Zeta talk, they say, and there are dozens of such moons that are equivalent to our moon in size. So now you know why, the U.S. government is in a panic about what they call about asteroid defense and near-Earth asteroids. What are we going to do? But the Zetas have said that at no time will any of these moons get more than 5 million miles from Nibiru. And during the passage, it's more like 30 million miles away from Earth. We are not going to be that close, that there would be any danger of an impact from one of Nibiru's moons. Now, debris, the crud in the tail, it doesn't get, the repulsion force doesn't protect against that. That slings in like a meteor, like space junk and the like. And we are having all kinds of bolides and et cetera, and have had for over a decade, which, the excuse is, that's space junk, or that type of thing, or it's just some meteor shower, even though the meteor shower isn't due, and this is too big and bright to be a meteor, etc., just excuses. But when you see these moons, it's just astonishing. Okay. Let's see. Then the moons, and after 2003 and 4, when we saw them at a distance, we didn't see them except in 2010. They showed up in the stereo ahead and behind images, which are looking at all of this from the side. Whereas what our problem here on Earth is that the charged dust cloud is between Nibiru and the Earth. Earth and Nibiru are both magnetic planets, and therefore they attract, this magnetic dust, charged dust, and cloud the view. But now lately, we are seeing, the moons and the strings. I think it's because it's gotten closer. The whole thing has gotten closer, which I call the Nibiru complex. Not just Nibiru, the body itself. It has all these moon swirls, the charged dust, and therefore it's and it has different appearances. You can see it, as I said earlier, as a second sun. Dawn and dusk, it will sometimes rise and set twice. And people see that and they say, wait, I thought I saw the sun rise and now there it is again, slightly different place. Etc. And that gets caught on camera on a few occasions. And sometimes in a monster persona. And what the heck is that? It's where it looks really big and round and pale, and you say, my gosh, is it that big? But it's not. Something like a moon swirl or Nibiru itself can appear as a monster because the light from that bends outward, and then it gets caught in Earth's gravity and bends back toward Earth. And so what we're seeing is where the light arrives on its bending back, and it's too big. So monster persona, you can take a look at my websites, enter into the search engine monster or whatever, and you'll get all the detail on that. Now, is it just required and you have to wait for second sun or string of pearls and lucky break, or you can go out with your filters, as Alberto does. He uses Mylar or takes the insert from a floppy disk, which he filters for red, and then he gets all this detail coming out. But there's also a couple of webcams, one in Italy and one in France, where the skies are fairly clear as you look out over the water, and we have a running blog on the poleshiftning.com called Nibiru Daily. And a dedicated guy in Germany goes to these webcams and looks, because he finds, that at a certain time of day, he can usually capture a little red or pink dot there, and when he expands it and enhances it, there's Nibiru with its burly shoulders. It looks like a football player with two burly shoulder pads. So Nibiru Daily, even though it's closely shrouded by red dust, it's a big magnet, and that's why it's shrouded by the red dust. But it looks like a fuzz ball in most cases. If you look out with a camera or whatever, they say, well, no, I don't see Nibiru. What I see is a dark, fuzzy area. Well, it's blocking sunlight, etc. Or people say, oh, that's a lens flare, or it's a smudge on the lens. So. Or if it's seen as a second sun at dawn or dusk, the excuse is, oh, that's probably just a sun dog. Excuses are rampant, and I should have an hour-long lecture on that, all the excuses, although I throw it in now and then. Alrighty, South America roll is going on, and the Zetas have said in 2010, going into 2011, we were going to have what they call the 7 of 10. And the 7 of 10 was, it's way back in 2008, someone said, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are we? 10 being the pole shift, the Zetas said, we're at the 2. And when we got to the 7, which was about the end of 2010, going into 2011, they said we're going to have a lot of plate movements, which we will detail, and we call that the 7 of 10. Then we're going to have the 8 of 10, where there's more visibility of the Nibiru complex and a lot of sociological changes. And then the 9 of 10, which is the 7.3 weeks that are the last weeks, and then the hour of the pole shift, which is 10 of 10. Well, 7 of 10 involved sinking of pushing down of the Sunda plate in Indonesia, and this clicked off at the right time frame and as scheduled. But Indonesia claimed it was just a lot of rain. No matter what you could see it on the MODIS satellite images, that there was flooding over the land, and they would say, oh, no, we're just having a lot of rain. But when you read the local articles, they were talking about seawater coming in, not rainwater. And the seawater would never go away, So they were forbidden, from printing stuff in the press over there, and rain was the excuse. So then it slowed down because Obama was trying to announce, and this was a big deal. Like, he was determined to grab the mic and say Nibiru is real. There was a national security thing put out by Reagan. I've countered that. People can talk about it now. And there was all kinds of attempts to kill him, etc. And then finally, when they had Jade Helm, 2015, and everybody was ready for the panic that might happen, and he was supposed to that year, October 20th of that year, by no later than that, announce and admit, and he lacked courage. The Zeta said he backed out, because he wasn't, bad choice of someone to put in there to make a major announcement like that. So we didn't get it. Instead, here we are fluffing along from, 2015 on, and what are we at? 3 years now, and no official announcement. It just keeps getting more obvious. So, meanwhile, the powers that be, because yes, we have powers that be, who are worried about our spiritual development, which is really, frankly, what this is all about. People say, well, what about saving human life? Well, it's not about that. Think about that. If that was the case, then why do we have so rampant starvation and diseases like the plague and Ebola and on and on? It's about growing souls to be loving and wise, and these are all lessons. This is a big self-taught schoolhouse, and it's not supposed to be just an easy ride because there's very little spiritual growth when everybody is born beautiful, and is taken care of, and it's just a party. This is not a party. You're supposed to care about other people, take risks, be a hero, and grow spiritually. Okay. So it was slowed down, and they put humming boxes on the aliens, with the Council of Worlds, which is the administrative force, police force, if you want, plus kind of like the Supreme Court, and they put humming boxes on plate borders, which people actually discovered, and they said it's funny and it hums and you can't crank it open, and the military came and ran off with it, and that's the last we heard. Well, most of that stuff was undersea along plate borders, but it slowed down the plate movements so they weren't abrupt, so the earthquakes weren't as big, because they were trying to give Obama and everybody else time to get it out there, to let people know, because once people realize these are the end times, they will make spiritual choices, and you don't do that in a day. Should I, give up my penthouse and my video games and my Corvette, and go live in the country and shovel manure, or what, So there are many, many decisions that can be made, and it's to give people the opportunity to do that, to give souls incarnated into human bodies. And yes, we have more than one incarnation. Okay. 7 of 10 over there in South America. After Indonesia was South America roll, which is the top part kind of falls to the left and the bottom part stays where it's at, nailed to Antarctica, and then the Caribbean gets crunched in the middle of all of that. So that's been ongoing. since 2011. And it's still in process, not completed yet, but there are some things that have happened which show this is in process. But you don't hear about this in the media. Well, it's in Brazil, we'll have things happening. For instance, the beaches will suddenly have all the water gone. It'll be out there somewhere. Where did it go? Because South America tilts over, to the west. Simultaneously, you'll have waves washing in Chile, exactly on the other side of the continent. Because if you fall over this way, there's, the water's got to go somewhere and temporarily high, but over, in southern Brazil. So at other times, the area of Brazil will have unexplained sloshing water coming in because of this wobble, the earth wobble that's going back and forth, where people say the sun is not rising or setting in the right place. Well, that affects, water can get trapped in areas like Argentina, in southern Brazil, where water coming up, from the south, if where's it going to go? It has to slide over toward the South Atlantic, toward Africa, and temporarily there's too much water there, so it rushes up on the beaches. So these things are all detailed in my newsletter, and it's really considered proof that the South America roll is in process and that tipping westward, and also that the earth wobble is pulling back and forth. When we had a hurricane go into the Caribbean, it was notable too that there was sloshing beyond what the hurricane would bring, and to where there was areas that were just without water, manatees left stranded and the like. And it didn't have anything to do with the hurricane, but it had to do with the wobble. Okay. See, the North American continent also shows evidence of the wobble and the 7 of 10 plate movements. North America is an odd plate because, unlike South America or Africa, it cannot roll. It has a flat top. The top actually runs, all the way from the far east of Russia, where the North American continent ends, right through the Arctic, over to Iceland, etc., one big straight line. So it's a flat top, and it can't roll. So instead, as the Atlantic spreads apart and the Pacific compresses, Mexico is pulled westward toward the Aleutian Islands, and this is called a bowing tension, which has caused crevasses in North America. Bridges sometimes fall down and the like, and the only way this is going to be eased is for the New Madrid fault line to finally rip at a diagonal. Now, what the evidence that this kind of bow tension is going on is the buoys off of Mexico. All the quake swarms and booms in the U.S. are due to the bow tension, which will eventually rip, as I said, the New Madrid fault line. Is the public being told the truth? Let's take a look at the recent supposed 8.4 quake just offshore in southern Mexico. In the opinion of the Zetas, this was a magnitude 12 due to the vast area affected all the way across to Kamchatka. So you say, well, come on, Nancy, how can you make that up? Well, all you have to do, we went and quickly looked at the buoys and caught snapshots of it. And what you saw right after the quake was that the buoys were throbbing all along the plate border, North American plate border, just on top of the granite that was the North American plate, up through, British Columbia, across, the Aleutian Islands, all the way over there to Kamchatka, not in the ocean. Now, tsunamis travel through the ocean. It would have had to gone around Hawaii and didn't. Nothing else was affected, just where the granite was under the water the granite of the North American plate. Now that's a distance of 7,000 miles from the epicenter, and this is one way you determine magnitude. It is not just the size of the jolt, but also the distance, where it was felt, the distance affected. So the USGS reported, it's an 8.4. I think they even tried to say 8.1, but they also produced a shake map. This is another way you can tell. You go, and I went back and I compared, to earthquakes in the past, 1906 in San Francisco, or the big one in Chile in 1960, or the big one up in Alaska, and they produced the shake maps. And it's supposed to be where anybody has any kind of reported shaking. Buildings shake, things fall down, there's a jolt or anything like that. That's just supposed to be included, but it wasn't. During that Mexican quake, this is showing you how the USGS lies, the big lie. Earthquake lights were seen in Mexico City beyond the shake map perimeter. The USGS shows the Mexico 8.4 quake having only a 350-kilometer spread on the shake map, yet buildings swayed in Mexico City, and that is 1,000 kilometers away, 3 times further than they admitted on their shake map. So, why are they doing this? They're underreporting magnitude on their databases and deleting whatever they can, too. If nobody's looking, they just slice out. People have said that they delete the earthquakes in front of their eyes at times. And why do they do this? Because if you run up statistics saying, how many 8-point, or how many above 7-point do we, and what you get is something that doesn't look as bad as it is, even though it looks bad enough. It's like almost exponential. The curve goes wing right up. So, and also they've dialed down the live seismographs, which it used to be back when Nibiru first came into the solar system. We would occasionally get what they call the Earth ringing like a bell, where everything went black. And then they took all the seismographs offline and tuned them down so, they wouldn't react except if it was really catastrophic. Well, the Mexico quake made everything ring like a bell. And now we have the New Madrid heave. What about this? Because it's under a lot of tension. Fascinating to see that the river level near New Madrid was blocked. They couldn't get their barges up and down because there wasn't enough water out there. The river level was showing -7 feet near Memphis, or just to the south of Memphis. So I went and said, well, what other possibilities? Maybe that's a drought. If that's the case, then everything up above Memphis is going to have even less water because water drains south, right? But no, it was the opposite. It was, just north of Memphis at Grafton, it was 15 feet plus 15 feet. And further yet, north up at Hannibal, it was plus 11. So it was flowing down. There was mild drought. It wasn't even considered a drought in the nearby states. But 11 feet was flowing down to 15 and then being blocked, at Hannibal. And it could not get past Memphis. Now, what is significant about this? The history of the New Madrid region reports that heaving near Memphis occurred during the last big quake there in 1811 and 1812. This heaving, in fact, formed the Real Foot Lake as the Missouri River ran there formerly. The waters trapped by the 1811 quake heaving the land, but given the import of the September heaving, did the issue appear in the evening news? Are you hearing about a ring of pearls up in the sky? Are you hearing about, how that the Mexican quake jolted Kamchatka? Are you hearing any of this? That at the same time we have water receding from Brazil beaches, we have it flowing in and flooding the beaches over in Chile? No, you hear nothing of this. It's local news only, which is another way that this is all handled. We used to hear about bolides. Screamed across half of Canada and wah. And now we don't hear it at all unless you happen to be in Canada and they say in the local news, oh, by the way, that was just a piece of space junk or whatever the local story is, but you don't hear about it anywhere else in the world. If you weren't on the internet, you wouldn't even know that these things are going on. All right, just as the Memphis heaving was hush-hush, the very noticeable increase in booms from snapping rock cannot be swept under the rug so easily, given the stress on the North American plate, which the Zetas have long predicted will rip open along the New Madrid as part of the plate movements to precede their predicted pole shift. The increase in booms was only reported in the well-controlled media because an establishment excuse was ready at hand. Wait until you hear this one, in case you weren't exposed to it already. It's leap seconds. We're having earthquakes because of leap seconds. The thing every 4 years or something like that, they have to insert a second, in order to, adjust the clocks. And this has been going on for like decades and decades. And it's steady. I went to take a look, and there's been no change in the pace, and the like. So it has no. By the way, this is an article that was included in the Daily Mail, Yahoo, The Guardian, RT, and even the prestigious Live Science. It wasn't, as they say, the woo-woo tinfoil hat crowd that was talking about this. It was a theory presented to the Geological Society that earthquake spates follow Earth slowing within 4 to 5 years after the slowdown occurs. They predicted the next biggie is to occur in 2018, when lots of earthquakes are to be expected. I went to take a look and I said, what? There's been no increase in the leap second insertion. How can they say all of a sudden that now we're going to have a lot? And I took a look at the earthquake too, and there's no relationship to leap seconds and when they started or when they're inserted or anything. It has no relationship to the facts, to the data, in other words. But why was all these media outlets reporting this? Because they hope that most people will just read the title, just read the subject line, and remember that, and go back to work, go back to shopping, nothing to see here, move along, right? You're expected to accept the conclusion without looking any further. In fact, the data says the opposite of what this person is claiming. But the articles never say that. They just say, oh, it's prestigious, Geological Society article. Okay, mimic proof. What the heck is mimic? I'm not sure what MIC stands for. But it is a system that uses microwave to take a look at moisture in the air for weather satellite imaging, right? And it's from satellites up there, and they're using microwave. Now, microwave is one of these particles that likes to run with radar and magnetons and electrons and et cetera. And there's some clumping and grouping that goes on, okay? So there is when they, in other words, some of this stuff is not just microwave. Microwave made a line. We've had radar circles for a while, maybe 6, 7, 8 years. They showed up in Australia first as circles that looked like circles with spikes or spokes, I want to say. And then they showed up, I think, in Mexico, surprisingly, or kind of like over Mexico City a couple of years before they had their big quake. So it more or less is from the stress in the rock, which causes, according to the Zetas, an electronic screech. And this affects the radar so that it clumps because there's more to particle flows than man can imagine. I mean, they say for every particle that man is aware of, we know of 1,000. So there's a lot more particles out there, subatomic particles. Okay. So what people were noticing on the mimic was that there was a line drawing from Nigeria down to the Scotia Plate, just to the right of the tip of South America, just down there near Argentina, south of Brazil. It's like a fractured little platelet that came off of the Antarctic plate or something. And then there was other things that branched off from this area off into the Pacific. What was it? And the Zetas explained that it was all the stress there from plate movement. And why Nigeria? In the opinion of the Zetas, this is related to their predicted plate movements, the Africa roll creating a crunch point in Nigeria. Nigeria does have excessive earthquakes compared to all the other countries and their history. The stress there creates a type of arcing to the Scotia plate, arcing, which is also under stress, and that's what was showing up on the micas. Now, why Nigeria? Because this Africa roll, which is also in process, moves the top part to the east, falling over, toward the Red Sea, but it also drops the Africa plate into the Indian Ocean, and then it kind of tries to close at Nigeria. That's a point where there's a crunch where Morocco and South Africa might come closer to each other, crunching Nigeria, therefore the stress, therefore the increase in quakes. Okay. Now, the Scotia plate is close to where, in the opinion of the Zetas, new land will emerge between the tip of South America and the tip of Africa. This is absolute vintage Zeta talk, where they did the new land, what's going to happen. They predicted a pole shift of 90 degrees, so that the equator runs through Antarctica, up through the middle of the Atlantic, across the Arctic, and down through the middle of the Pacific, etc., and that because the Antarctic plate will be pushed by the compressing Pacific toward the center of the Arctic, that it will poke up between the tip of South America and the tip of Africa, thus bringing new land. And they say that's why a lot of people are clustering in South Africa, ready to jump and put a flag down saying, I own this land type of thing, because it will be ideal and be very tropical, be very rich and lush for growing plants, because all that muck at the bottom of a sea, is fertile and fertilizer, etc. So anyway, all this stress is showing up, the arcing of the mimic from Nigeria down to the Scotia plate, and boom, what do we have? We have a big earthquake right about that time on the Antarctic plate border, just about where the new land is supposed to arise. No explanation about why the earthquake appeared, right? But it all relates. Let's see. The jolt on the edge of the Antarctic plate did cause the Earth to ring like a bell again. Once again, pardon my cat, she wants my lap. She can't have my lap right now. Africa roll. Meanwhile, Africa rolls. In the opinion of the Zetas, this will cause the tip of Africa to remain rooted at Antarctica, but the top part to fall to the east, to the right, as I said, toward Saudi Arabia and the Red Sea. But if it does anything, it pulls apart. It pulls apart at the Mediterranean, it pulls apart at Gibraltar, it pulls apart at Sinai, and the Red Sea is a little wider, etc. And meanwhile, Africa drops, which can be seen in the Africa Rift Valley, which is pulling apart. In fact, this process, confirming the Zeta prediction, was caught on film recently. Oh, this is another amazing thing. It's also in my newsletters, etc., and you can find it on film in Kanzania, which is over there in the Rift Valley. And a bunch of people standing around watching the ground heave, rise up several feet, and move toward them, closing a creek bed, which is they're standing next to. Nobody seems to panic. Maybe this happens regularly there. The populace steps back a little bit in astonishment. And the fact that South America and Africa are rolling, as the Zetas predict, has been disguised by the authorities by deactivating the buoys in the South Atlantic. They are all turned off. Go ahead and check this out, folks. I have images which I'm going to be showing on my YouTube tomorrow. All of them, all the way from way up there above the equator, all the way down to Antarctica, there isn't a buoy that's active. They're all red, deactivated. Now, why would that be? I mean, what's the point of having a book? It's been that way for 2 or 3 years, right? It's a cover-up. They don't want you to know about Nibiru. And people would say, wait a minute, how come that boy's going nuts over there? What's going on? Why is the water heaving? Why is Brazil getting this action on their beaches? Yada, yada, yada. Okay. Radiation locations. Moving east into the Middle East, we have the Zeta predicted stretching of the Eurasian plate, causing a leak of iodine-131 in Europe. That happened, I believe it was 2016. Did we ever find the results of all the investigations? Iodine-131, if I said 113, I meant 131. Iodine-131 comes from power plant operation, and Europe is very much into using nuclear power. If you take a look at who has them, Japan has them. The east coast of the United States is plethora of nuclear power plants, and so does Europe. They're big into it. Okay, this stands in contrast to the recent leak of Ru-106, which seemed to come from the South Urals. Russia admitted within 2 months or so that it was their nuclear waste containment that was the source, but Europe has yet to confess about iodine-131, who leaked it and what, and the reason, profit, because the iodine-131 leak was coming from cracks in their nuclear power plants, and you have to drain the water and fix the crack, which means that they have to give up charging money for nuclear power for a little bit, and they don't want to do that, so they just lie. I'm not sure what they did about the leak, but in Russia, it was nuclear waste, which is presumably paid by the taxpayers in Russia. So therefore, they said, yeah, it was a leak over here. We're at containment. We're fixing it, which they did, right? The Eurasian plate is pulling apart, and this has been going on for quite some time. They have twisting railroads, big crevasses and cracks that happen, etc. And a lot of electronic screech from the rock, which causes trouble with airplanes, such as electromagnetic, like the Germanwings plane that went into the Alps, and they said, the guy was suicidal, which he wasn't. It was EMP. We had a bunch of that stuff. Flying over the Mediterranean, too, because of the electronic screech pulling apart. The Ru-106 was also almost precisely on a line drawn by the Zetas to describe their predicted rip of the Eurasian plate from a line drawn just to the west of Karachi up toward the Urals. This leak of Ru-106 occurred confirming the accuracy of the Zeta predictions. This is a very significant, this line of where the Zetas from the start, vintage Zeta talk, have said, it will rip open and there'll be an inland bay that'll go all the way up to the Urals. And they drew the path, which has been on my site for quite some time. Sleepy Hollow, where they had so much. They said it was the uranium wafting out of etc. But it was EMP, swelling the brains of the people there, and they would walk around like zombies practically. That was on the path. Where they had this big burst of methane in the Urals, where they said, I think it was sundown. Commuters were going home from work. It was dark out already. All of a sudden, blaze of light. That was on that path. These things are happening, and so was this containment leak of the Ru-106 on that path. That's pulling apart. We're not getting an inland bay yet, but this is confirmation that it's in process. Okay, how did the Russians react to all this? And it has been noted that the Russians are more honest about talking about alien presence and also about Nibiru. That their astronomers will mention things like the Earth is tilting, which is why the sun is seen in the wrong place, etc. And they do all but come out and say, look, Nibiru is here. Well, their patriarch Kirill did that. He came out after this Ru-106 leak and said, we are in the end times. These are the times that the author of the book of Revelations wrote about. And it's now. It's now. And I quote his words. All people who love the motherland must be together because we are entering a critical period in the course of human civilization. This can be already seen with the naked eye. You have to be blind not to notice the approaching awe-inspiring moments in history that the apostle and evangelist John was talking about in the book of Revelations. Well, what does he mean, blind? You have to be blind not to see the signs. Well, we're talking, obviously, about the stuff up in the sky, like the string of pearls hanging up there, shining, 12 prongs of light through a breach in the clouds, etc., right? And people, the second sun rising and setting or whatever. This is what he was talking. And the Patriarch Kirill is equivalent to the Catholic Pope as far as prestige and importance and the position he holds. The Russian Orthodox Church is not Catholic, but this is the equivalent to the Pope. We're not getting this from our Pope, but the Vatican would surely, poison him in a heartbeat if he tried to tell the people the truth. What about the third Fatima secret, for instance? Oh, come on, it was because they saw some pope being assassinated. No, it wasn't. It was because they, and I think it was one of the popes two back who said, if you were to say to people that millions of people would be drowned in an instant, and there was nothing that they could do to save themselves, why bother? Why even tell them? You just kind of spoil their afternoon. You spoil their life, and then they would worry for nothing. So let's just not tell them. I mean, he came out and admitted that that's what the third Fatima secret was. It was talking about the kind of horrors that people in lands that will be flooded in an instant would have to go through, and the only alternative is to say, hug each other, love each other, and this life is not the last, and death is not the end. And I might add, drowning is not painful. How do I know? Because when I was being tortured in the past by MJ-12, and yes, that happened, one of the tortures was to smother me until I lost consciousness so that I would panic. But I think I understood I wasn't to die, and I didn't panic. And the hand over my nose and my mouth and my lungs, this is what I was surprised to find, worked like a bellows as hard as they could, and I couldn't stop that. That was an automatic reaction. Then I blacked out and came to about 20 minutes later, and nothing was wrong with me. It's not painful. That's what I'm trying to tell you. You're not anxious, and you pass over. And go to your next incarnation. Nothing to worry about. Okay. So is there a relationship to the plate movements with Patriarch Kirill's speech? Yes, there is, because he was just down there in 2016 chatting with the penguins. It hit the news. That hit the news. His speech about the end times didn't get a lot of coverage, not even in Russia, I'm told. But certainly when the Patriarch went down and walked around Antarctica and chatted with the penguins, it was everywhere because, penguins are cute, and we're not talking about scary stuff like we're going to have the end times, and you better be away from the coastline, and you better get your family up into the highlands, and you should have been there last year already, and where are your seeds and your chickens and your goats, and do you really know how to work with hand tools? Do you know how to build a windmill out of car parts? All these things that you should be talking about. Instead, you hear where to buy plastic crud, for Christmas for your kids. Oh, look, the little Twinkie can go into the the tree, and cute little fake dog or what. I despair sometimes, Okay, the reason for his visit was because he knew that Antarctica will be tropical in the aftertime after the pole shift, and he's the Patriarch for all of Russia, not just the people that live in Russia, but the people that will be migrating to Antarctica, because they've kind of like sliced up Antarctica. There's the Russian piece and the British piece, and they made a pie out of it, So I think he was walking around in the Russian piece of the pie. Now we have the Iraq quake. This is another one. And this is all just really recent stuff, folks. Things are moving fast. Signs of the plate movement can also be seen in the recent Iraq quake, which in the opinion of the Zetas was due to the boot of Saudi Arabia shifting. That's a plate. If you take a look at the plates, it outlines the boot and it has a pointed top that sticks up into Iraq. When South Africa rolls, the Saudi plate is shoved and bumped, and it rolls so that the toe drops toward the south into the Indian Ocean. And this causes the pointed top to rip through Iraq, breaking open the oil wells, which the Zetas have said, as the last week's come close, it's going to be a holocaust because all those oil wells will burst into fire. Why would they not? And it will be not a place to be, Okay, so this was right along the edge of the Saudi Arabia plate, where it is pushed under all those mountains in Kurdistan, that are parts of Turkey, and that's why the little mountains have been building there. So there's plate movement going on there too. This region has become destabilized, but according to the Zetas, their predicted rupture of Iraqi oil wells is not yet in process. All right, that jolt, that quake, which was underreported as they all are lately, did indeed cause all the live seismographs to show once again that the Earth itself was jolted. They all went black, ringing like a bell, as I think it was somebody in USGS or was it NASA said, yes, all the plates in the world rang like a bell. It was such a big quake. Well, this was another one, rang like a bell. David Meade and his prediction that in September 23rd, there was going to be an alignment of constellations that only happens once every whatever. Apparently, it happens once every 300 years or so, But the moon was going to be in just such a place, and the Bible was reporting this as when the maiden and the lion and has the moon at her feet and all this, and therefore we're in the end times, which we are, Okay. And this got so much attention that the term Nibiru kept being tossed into subject lines in the media. And boy, did we spike, the people that were researching Zeta Talk and myself, etc. Because if you type Nibiru into a search engine, the thing that pops up top is a Wikipedia article that has, if you click on it, right there in the middle of your screen, it says 1995 Nancy Leader who wrote the Zeta Talk website and blah, blah, blah. So, David Meade gets in the press, Nancy Leader and Zeta Talk get in the press. Well, first we had Planet 9 in early 2016 and the admission that, yes, there was a gravity tug out toward Orion, despite all the denials since 1983. In 1983, when they went up and took a look with the infrared probe and said, oh, there's something out there, yeah, but it doesn't seem to be inbound. Well, they can't say that because they also said they don't know what it is. So there was panic because there it was, and it was inbound. But as they said, oh no, never mind. We shouldn't have even gone to look because there are no perturbations out toward Orion, and the ancients were wrong that the outer planets all pull in that direction. Now they're saying the ancients were right and Planet 9 was found out there, and I guess they think everyone's just going to forget. But it doesn't come up in the media that in 1983 they said the opposite. But just admitting the truth apparently is too much given the level of lies in the past. So instead we toss out terms. The David Meade focused, despite the certainty that his dates would be missed and that he would eventually be dismissed, had Nibiru in the headlines. Could this lead to the truth, to educating the public? It certainly led to the Zeta Talk website. For several years, as I said, the Nibiru, this has been going on for like 4 years where you type Nibiru and then that's what you get, the wiki article. Why doesn't the cover-up just tell Google to change. If they're worried about it, why don't they say, get that out of there? Well, there was some arm wrestling that has gone on periodically. But for the Zetas, the junta running the U.S., not Trump, but the junta, has a hand in this. They told Google, on pain of death, you will keep that such that anyone who types Nibiru into the search engine will find this article up top, and they have. Here we go with the CIA arrests. Is there any relationship to that and the planet Nibiru? Oh, yes. Is there a secret government, as I keep implying, the junta? Isn't it politics as usual? Where we here on the Zeta Report do not want to indulge in conspiracy theories which run rampant in all directions. We will say this about that. The Marines apparently landed at Langley over the November 11th to 12th weekend, but many eyewitnesses, they confirmed each other. They said these big helicopters went down. We could see that, and it was on a weekend. The 11th was a Saturday, and this was during the same time period that both Hillary and John McCain were seen with identical boots on their right feet. Both of them, and they looked like they were from the same box. She had broken her toe or something, and he had, I don't know what the excuse, of minor injuries for both of them, right? Right leg. Now, according to the Zetas, they're both under house arrest. Do we know that might be true? Well, a couple of days later, there was John McCain sitting next to his daughter in a garden area, on a bench. He's got the boot on the opposite foot. Instead of the right foot, he's got it on his left foot. And the media asked him about that, and they said, oh, why don't you have the boot, which is supposed to be like a cast, supporting your injured foot? And he said something about, it got tired and I wanted to rest the leg. What? So, that's actually illogical. So his leg was tired, so he was moving the brace from the injured leg to the good leg, and it has nothing to do with house arrest or an ankle bracelet. So that's my long lecture. Andre, did I put you to sleep?
No.
You saw, I attached these 60 moons. The photo was 60 moons, and the one with the boomerang where you can identify them in the boomerang,
Right.
And you said that not only is this like a jaw dropper, but that somebody had sent you some photos that were similar in showing these kind of moons. Is that correct?
Well, I tried to research as much as possible, and on the YouTube device, there's always something going on, whether it's being downplayed or made to be something else. All of these things in the sky. So I try to go into watching these videos with a level of discernment, knowing that there could be an agenda behind it. But this gentleman, he was calling it Nibiru. And it was a photo and partial video of, it would look like it looked like the front side of the boomerang. Let's say you're looking on it dead on and it's flat, and you're looking at the front side, and the center of it was Nibiru, and on the left side and the right side was these string of pearls type glowing orbs. But these orbs were of different sizes and different colors, and they seemed to be moving. So the center object, with these other objects coming out the side of it in the string of pearls fashion, with the one in the center being the largest, this person was calling it Nibiru with its 12 moons. When they count them, there were 12.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. Now that I saw Alberto's secondary imaging that you shared with me from the 30th today, I've said that's it. It's different parts of the world picking up the same thing.
Right. The fact that there was 12 pearls in the Missouri photo and 12 prongs of light. Obviously, each moon was creating a prong of light that bounced off the cloud and went down. So, but it was probably the boomerang is so brilliant. I'm thinking it had to be that, because the string that clings close to Nibiru is usually shrouded in dust that you can't always make it out. But there's at least 4 different areas that have strings in this November 30th image from Alberto. It's hard to know which one caused the Missouri string of pearls. It's hard to know which one is responsible, because we have so many choices. But 12 is very interesting. The earlier string of pearls from 2003 and 4, etc., were fewer. They tended to be more like 5, 6, 7 moons, not 12.
Right.
And some of these things in the photos look like they could have 30, and they seem to be pairing up too, which will be another day's discussion, I'm sure. Why do they? And like they're going hand in hand, 2 by 2, So this is all, and the point is, it's so visible. And people, if you can see it without needing a filter, and just you're out walking and there it is, that type of thing. According to the Zetas, this is like blockbuster, because it'll end up breaking the cover up. Although I got to tell you, they have an excuse for everything. Remember when earthquakes were blamed on fracking? It was fracking, or it was, the equipment is more sensitive, Then I said they'll never deal with the earth wobble where it's tilting to the right or the left, because there's nothing. Oh, and they came up with one. The Arctic is melted more than the Antarctic, so the Earth is off center because it's lighter up on top, and it's like a top spinning and slowing down and going wow, 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 like that. There was articles out. This is about a year old. I can dig them up. Yeah, and the reason
that's
that we
dumb.
The Earth is wobbling like a top that's slowing down. Well, look at the leap second excuse here for earthquakes. I tried to think. Then I said they'll never deal with the red dust coming in, which is all over the place, and people say, "Oh my, so red, and red dust on the white snow, and where's this going?" And at first it was industrial, pollution, but then it was showing on the snow up in Siberia somewhere where they have no industrial processes. Like, what's that about? Well, and so they were always making, and it was from the Sahara. It blows west, and by the Coriolis effect, it ends up in Houston or something like that on the red dust, and
right.
I don't think it's from the Sahara. It's not red, but that's the standard.
It's not red, it's yellow.
For any red dust. Right. So it was getting embarrassing. So what did they do? They had NASA, send up rockets with poofing out red dust and another one's blue-green, and they said this is going to go up into the lithosphere over the Atlantic, from Cape Canaveral, because we need to figure out the jet stream and how it swarms around up there in the lithosphere, right? So now if anybody says, "Oh, look at the red dust, oh my God, the whole thing," oh, that's just NASA dust. They're checking the jet stream in the lithosphere. So they throw this stuff out, and they hope that the common man doesn't read any more than the headline, and that's the argument. And you're all crazy. You're wearing tinfoil hats. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, the windows in your house shuttered, etc., and creaked. No, just the wind. We didn't have any earthquakes. This kind of thing. Aye. So anyway, this hour we gave you a lot of facts. They're all in Zeta Talk and in the newsletters, etc. You can go in there and read up all about it, and with links and articles and who said what, etc. And Andre is going to have all of this in a podcast, as he always does. And don't forget, just because we're talking about here it comes and here's the proof, that's not even half the story. The major part of the story is, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
Duckweed is high protein. It not only feeds ducks, but you can dry it and make protein powder out of it. Bugs and worms, highly nutritious, a lot more so than raising beef cattle. all kinds of different plants. You can get your entire vitamins from bugs and plants and weeds. Weeds are high in vitamin C. Something like amaranth and corn mixed together gives you the protein equivalent of raw red meat. So read up on this stuff. And Andrea and I have done so many hours devoted to these survival issues. How to build a houseboat. How to purify your water. This is where you should be going. And remember, the end times not only bring changes to where all the crudge of our current civilization, all the corruption, all the pollution is going to go away, but you also can be more spiritual. And if you do that in the right way, you'll meet all kinds of aliens. Now, come over with their little spaceships and give you trips and gifts and say how do you do in a way that you stun you. It's a big love fest. It's a love fest. A love fest.
Is that what you call it, saying how do you do?
Yeah, but they'll do it telepathically,
Right.
And they'll have they will come bearing gifts, if you're the right sort. Who's the right sort? Somebody who cares about other people, about others, and it's not just looking to save your own sorry skin, So put your mind right, become the right sort, and have a whole fun life ahead of you.
Right.
That's it.
I will say with these photographs. You're talked out. Okay. I was going to say, though, with our podcast situation, when we do the podcast on Blog Talk Radio, I'm limited to the amount of pictures that I can put on my slideshow. Whereas when Nancy puts up the YouTube video on Tuesday after our Monday show, it is a little bit more compelling to see those images as we're talking about it. Like I said, I'm limited to the amount that I can put on Blog Talk Radio, but the YouTube channel for Nancy Leader is going to have this episode up there with all the pictures as well pertaining to which ones that we're talking about.
Yeah.